Hello to all of my fellow nurses out there. I am so excited to be back with you today. I'm sharing another bouncing back from burnout story. And I have Christy Hendricks here. Christy Hendricks is a nurse entrepreneur. So Christy, thank you so much for agreeing to be here with me today. I'm so excited to share your story. So welcome.
Oh, thank you. It's really good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So 2 questions I always like to start off with is what got you into nursing in the first place, and how long have you been a nurse?
Let's see. I've been a nurse for, I think it's about 24 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And what got me into nursing was kind of an accident. And maybe I shouldn't say an accident. It wasn't an accident. It was certainly not planned that I was going to be a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
It was just kind of unforeseen. And so that story is really, I was getting ready to go to law school. And, wait, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was getting ready to go to law school, and I had a premature baby. There she was, all premature and everything. So she was, and I mean, literally, I like had all the stuff laid out on my desk, my getting ready to take the LSAT and do all that stuff. And she was born early. I was working for a law firm at that time, and she came at 31 weeks, and that was my first daughter, my oldest.
Yeah.
And so it was all new to me. And there I was in the NICU with a 31-weeker, and it was so foreign to me. But at the same time, I was kind of looking around going, this is really interesting what all these nurses are doing. I kind of enjoy this, and they get to take care of, sweet little babies. And, so there was the tech side of it that I really enjoyed, but then there was also the little soft touch, and holding babies. And what did I know? What did I know? What did I know at the time? Yeah. So that's what got me into nursing, because if you had asked me before, would I ever be a nurse? I would say, heck no. Why would I want to be a nurse?
Yeah.
It wasn't on my radar. Not for a second. So.
Gotcha. That's fascinating. I love that those nurses sort of like brought that to your attention and sort of inspired you to pursue something different that you've done for, 20 plus years now. That's really exciting. Both of my children actually were premature. My daughter spent some time in the NICU, and I was a nurse already at the time, but I just remember being so like in awe of these nurses, and I've always done adult nursing. So these little teeny tiny humans, I was like, oh, maybe I could do this someday. I haven't gone there yet, but it was definitely inspiring and a lot different and very interesting. I would totally agree with you.
Yeah.
So fast forward in that career and talk to us about a time when you started feeling burnout.
Oh boy. I think it was probably, I want to say maybe about 10, 11, 12 years in.
Okay.
And I was feeling burnout, and I couldn't exactly just say, oh, it's because I've been working night shifts now for, 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
Because I did do night shifts for like 15 years straight. And so that was in the NICU, and then previous to that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I realized something was wrong when all of a sudden, or maybe not all of a sudden, maybe it crept up on me. I would start to feel this anxiety, when I went to work. And I especially dreaded if I was going to be first admit. And it seemed like every time I walked in the door, I was first admit. And so that was very uncomfortable for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I also noticed that, trying to just think of like kind of the signs that I realized I was burning out. I didn't want to be there. Whereas before I really did,
Yeah.
And I just found I just didn't want to even be at work. And I would actually, kind of my story is I would always take a nap before I would go into work. So I'd have to be there at 7 p.m. for a 12-hour shift.
Mm-hmm.
So about like 4 o'clock, I would lay down, take a nap. If I hadn't worked the night before, I would take a little nap so I'd be rested to go in. And I remember just laying there looking at the clock, because if they were going to cancel me or put me on call, they would have to call me by 5 o'clock. I would be laying there looking at the clock, hoping, praying that my phone would ring, because I wanted to be canceled or put on call. And I'm like, you know what, this is out of hand.
Yeah.
What's going on? I hate going to work. So
Mhm.
those were probably my first clues that I'm like, I'm really burnt out. The anxiety was just overwhelming.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm never to the point that I have to leave work or I couldn't go into work because of the anxiety, but and I can't even really put my finger on it. And I mean, I never went to the doctor and got, some diagnosis of anxiety.
Right.
Smart enough. I'm smart enough to be able to diagnose myself, with anxiety. So anyway, that was that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like one sort of common theme with these bouncing back from burnout stories, and I know that like I experienced this as well, is that there are all these little signs that
Mm-hmm.
we just sort of dismiss and we don't want to listen to. And we use all of those excuses to kind of justify them away. Like, this is comfortable. I'm good at my job. I have skills. They pay me good money. I have a good schedule. All those little things that we use. I love my coworkers. Those things that like sort of keep us going, even though we really should stop and listen to those small cues before it becomes, I've gone to my doctor and I've gotten a diagnosis of anxiety. And there was one nurse that I interviewed who was like, I drank wine and took my Ativan every night before bed. And
Yeah.
I didn't think anything of it until, one day, like I'm getting fired and it's all hitting me in the face, all these little things that I should have listened to. And I think that's pretty common and something that we can sort of encourage our fellow nurses to really listen to. If you're having any of those, like, oh God, I hope they call me off, or like, all of a sudden I'm dreading going into work and I don't really know why. It's all those little subtle things that kind of add up in the end to a bigger picture. And I think that's pretty important for nurses to know, so that maybe if they are feeling those small things, they can start listening and asking questions before they get to a point where they're like anxious and in tears and ready to quit the nursing profession altogether.
Right. Exactly. Right.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned anxiety was kind of a big thing for you. How did those feelings affect your sort of mental, physical, spiritual self?
I think I started to become like very short with my family because I was very unhappy at work. So don't, I don't know that I was short with my coworkers because I probably knew enough not to go there. Because I mean, I really enjoyed my coworkers. Not to say that I don't enjoy my family, but you usually abuse the people that are closest to you. So I would be short. I think is probably the biggest way in how it was affecting me. Um, yeah, it was just anxiety and dread. I mean, it was just a constant state of anxiety and dread, and mostly, right before a shift, Um, and what I noticed too is that when it wasn't a day I didn't have to go to work that night, I was fine. I was perfectly fine. I didn't have anxiety at home. I just had anxiety before I had to go in for a shift or while I was at work. So,
Gotcha. One of the other nurses that I had interviewed, she said that when she was in that sort of state and not really choosing to recognize it, that the way she showed up for other people was very like short, very abrasive. One of her coworkers told her, your facial expression says, "Get the F out." And so it's really interesting how those, like, we are also really good at thinking that we are hiding what it is that we're feeling. And it does come out in ways that the people around us and the people closest to us definitely notice. I mean, I'm sure that your family noticed that you were being short just as much as you noticed.
oh yeah, oh certainly. And now that you mentioned that about that other nurse, I do remember one or two nurses that I worked with. They're like, oh, they kind of. I was like walking towards them. And they're like, oh, you look like you're pissed. What's wrong? You look like you're pissed off. I don't know if it was because I was so stressed out or what, or if it was just because me, when I get very intent on a task, I think I look pissed off. But I'm not. I'm just really intent on what I'm doing. I'm very singular focused.
Fair enough. So then eventually, when you're going on in that kind of burned out state, like, did that have any effects on your like bedside and your career path?
yes, I mean, it just brought up all this kind of uncertainty about what I was going to do as for my nursing career.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because, I decided, I was like, okay, this is my whole reason for going into nursing really was NICU. Um, I never, like I said before, I never even thought about nursing until I had my premature daughter. And then
Right.
I'm like, oh, okay, I'll go into the NICU. And so then once I burned out of the NICU, I'm like, well, that was my whole reason for nursing. Now what do I do? Now what do I do?
Right.
And so there was kind of like a sense of panic almost, um, because I took the expedient route into nursing as well because I already had a bachelor's degree in another field, and so I didn't want to have to go and get a master's. I had this newborn baby, my 31 weeker, and frankly, there was no money to go and get a master's degree,
Mm-hmm.
and so I got an ADN. Biggest mistake of my life, because then I was kind of faced with, well, if I want to progress in my nursing career or go into something non-clinical or whatever, I'm going to have at least a BSN, and I already have a bachelor, so I probably would have to get an MSN. And I was kind of joked and said, well, really, do I want a master's in misery? Because I was miserable. Why would I want to get a master's in misery? So I was kind of panicked, really, for a way out.
Yeah. I feel like there's a lot of nurses that really resonate with that because, like you said, NICU was your whole why of your career. And, you get going down a path and you have this vision. And when it doesn't work out the way that you had in your mind, you get I got this term from Christine Hassler. She's one of these life coaches that I love listening to. She calls it an expectation hangover. And it's basically what you feel when your expectations are not met. And it sounds like that's really kind of what happened to you. I mean, I can imagine that really threw you for a loop. At that point, did you just have the one child or did you have more?
No, but what, by the time I was burnt out,
By the time you were feeling burnout, you said it was 12 years in
I
your
had
career?
two. Yeah, I had two by that time. By the time I was burnt out. So
Gotcha. So
yeah.
one of the soapboxes that I kind of get on sometimes is the fact that oftentimes it's not just the job. Like burnout is not just one, there's not ever one cause. And I'm a firm believer that a lack of a self-care routine really plays into being burnt out because I feel like it starts with sort of that like generalized, like overwhelm, a little bit of anxiety, not really sure what's going on. And then that state can be very exhausting. And so, especially if you have kids or a family, you tend to start letting your self-care go to the bottom of that list and not caring for yourself in ways that like really nourish your body and, keep you mentally sharp and emotionally happy are part of what really plays into that whole sort of feeling of being burned out. And I'm curious to know how your self-care routine was during that time when you were feeling burned out.
I honestly can't say like I have some routine. I don't approach it as, well, I'm going to go do some self-care now. It's just life. You just do life. And, so sometimes, you do something really kind of fun and you go out with friends, you go, get a massage, you do whatever. I guess I just don't really see it as, oh, I'm going to do self-care. It was really, the burnout was really compartmentalized to my job. Everything else in my life was really going pretty well. I was really enjoying myself, my girls. I had such a great time, raising my girls. I was homeschooling them at the time, and I loved doing that. I would say if there was anything, it was just that very, very common, very typical lack of sleep, working the night shift. Although I can say that I was not like a lot of the nurses that I worked with on nights who would go home, go to bed, and then get up at noon. It's like, what? Are you kidding me? What are you, crazy? I'd sleep till 4. My family knew, don't come disturb me. I'll be up around 4 o'clock, because I'd get home at, like 8 o'clock and go to bed. It's like, I'm getting my sleep in. So I never neglected that. I absolutely did not neglect that. So um, I guess I'm just a very driven person, and so yeah, I did have a lot of involvements with my kids, with work. I really tried not to go into work on committees and all that kind of stuff. I just wasn't all about that. But
Yeah.
I don't know if I really could point to some kind of identify like some self-care type thing, because to me it's just life.
Gotcha. Well, it sounds like you are very, very smart, and you know that you cannot function properly without the correct amount of sleep, and that you were really advocating for your own rest by setting boundaries and saying, you don't bother me before 4.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing too, I guess, if you want to look at this as self-care, I know some people won't, but in the morning, and I still do the same thing now, I will sit and I will have my cup of coffee, doggone it, in the morning for 2 hours. I will sit in the morning and just think. And I don't meditate. I just sit there quietly. I enjoy my surroundings. Mm-hmm. And I would actually sit in this house when we were living in San Diego. I would sit in the pretty room. We called it the pretty room. My youngest daughter called it that. So I would just sit in the pretty room, and I would just sort of enjoy my surroundings, and when it was beautiful outside, which it always is in San Diego, so just looking out the window was really refreshing, for me. So I guess maybe you could point to that.
That's a really beautiful tool that I sometimes forget to practice, is just enjoying really being present, because I feel like, a lot of nurses don't just have nursing, don't just have families, but they're trying to run businesses, or they've got this side thing or that side thing, or they're volunteering. They've got all sorts of other stuff that they're doing. And I think that we tend to get caught up in like the to-do list that constantly rolls around in our head. And just the act of enjoying being present and just letting yourself be for a little bit is so, so powerful. So powerful. Mm-hmm. And it really sort of brings you back to center and reminds you like, oh yeah, I'm human too. I'm here to enjoy this experience, not to just, let my to-do list run me. So I love that tool. It's so beautiful. And sometimes I actually have to like physically write it on my calendar and schedule out a time slot to make myself do it, because I tend to get too caught up in my own to-do list. And it really makes so much difference. Just 10 minutes makes so much difference. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So tell me about what you did to bounce back from that state.
Like to bounce back, what, from burnout? From just
being really burned out. What did you do to kind of help with that anxiety? What changes did you make? Who supported you? Tell me about that journey to kind of fixing that anxiety and that burnout feeling.
I quit my job. So that anxiety went away fast. I mean, really, that was it. I mean, I quit my job. And so actually what I did is I thought, you know what, maybe I just need some respite. And so I left the NICU and I went and I worked in a pediatric clinic.
Okay.
And it was for the first, and I think I was only there for about a year or so, maybe a year. And so for the first few months, it was really wonderful because, nobody died. And I irrigated ears and, gave immunizations and took care of kids with snotty noses. It was just a peds clinic. It was an after-hours clinic. And not to dismiss it, it was what I needed at the time, because I could go into work and I really didn't have to think real hard. I didn't have any high acuity kids. No one was going to die. I didn't have these 27-weeker coming in. She's on the board, she's whatever. So it was respite for me, and that is what I needed. But after about a year of that, I was feeling that itch to go back. I needed to go back. And so I would call my friends in the NICU and say, hey, is it safe to come back? Because there was other stuff going on too, management stuff, administrative stuff. And I didn't like that part either. It wasn't, I don't want to say that it was all the anxiety, because it was more than just the anxiety. It was the acuity that we were they were bumping up the acuity on kids that we were bringing in, or keeping, I should say. And there was administrative burdens and things like that. But really, to bounce back, I quit that job, went, had some respite. I came back. I wasn't back 3 months, Jessica, when I realized, you know what? I'm done. I'm done. I can't stay here. And so then that kind of sense of panic kind of returned.
Yeah.
Because then it was like, okay, there is no respite for this. Now what do I do? Now I have to figure something else out. So, I don't even want to say I bounced back. I jockeyed. It's like sink or swim. And I had to figure out what else I was going to do. What's next for me? And honestly, I wandered aimlessly for over 7 years. 7 years. I just wandered aimlessly in different nursing positions that I never liked. There was one position that I actually liked. There was one nursing job I really, really liked, but it was grant funded, and we lost our grant.
Oh, no.
And so I was only there for a year, loving that job. I would just go in and do newborn home visiting, and I would do a little assessment on mom, little assessment on the baby, a lot of teaching. And I was free just my whole day, free to go about and see my 5 couplets, and I absolutely loved it. But yeah, we lost our grant. And so there I was thrown into that situation again where, okay, now I got to go find something else. So I held actually quite a few positions during that time. And this was all during the crash, 2008.
Oh my gosh.
I worked for med spas, and I was doing aesthetics. I was doing laser and Botox, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun. I loved it. It was a lot of fun. But then when 2008 came, they were all closing left and right, and you couldn't get a job. So, so I went through that, and it was just kind of, survival for me, because I had 2 girls, and by that time I had one in high school, one of them looking down college, and I couldn't go back to school. I couldn't justify sending myself to school to get a master's to be able to, take on new positions, because I had my girls in private school. I was paying for that. And then I knew I had college was right around the corner for my oldest daughter. So, it was uncertain times.
Gotcha. You know what I love about that story, though, is it sounds like you gave yourself permission to try a bunch of different things. Because I feel like sometimes nurses have this idea that, like you, when you first started, like, I became a nurse to be in the NICU, and that's your whole dream and your whole goal. And when that kind of blows up, it can be really scary to give yourself permission to try something new and to step out of the comfort zone, because it's change, and any change is scary to our subconscious. And, there's that anxiety and that excitement that comes along with it. But I think it's really important to give yourself permission to step away from what you're doing and try something new, to really bring the focus back on, what do I want? And if the answer is, I don't really know what I want, but I know I need to make money, there's a million things you can do as a nurse. And so giving yourself permission to just be brave and go out and try something new, try something different. There's always so much that you can do. And really, some people are like, I just want to leave the profession altogether. And which sometimes that's totally appropriate. Absolutely. If that's what your soul calling is, then by all means, like, I'm not here to tell you not to do that, but I'm also here to say that I know how hard it was to get that nursing license, and not giving yourself permission to really try something different and to think outside of that box of your initial vision. I mean, maybe go back to why you became a nurse in the first place and reconnect with that excitement for the profession. And then use that to go on and try new things until you find those things that fire up your soul again. And that's probably the thing that I love the most about nursing is, like, nursing is like a huge buffet. And you're never obligated to stay in one place. I mean, of course, there are, like, you have those thoughts, well, like, the unit trained me, and I have my friends here, and I've, they put in their time to train me, and I need to give back to the unit, and I need to get more involved. Of course, there's always that aspect of these decisions. But at the end of the day, if you're truly unhappy and having anxiety about going to work, there's absolutely no reason to continue down that path because it's not sustainable. And we all know that stress can lead to disease and can lead to ineffective coping mechanisms, to addiction, to eating, to all of those things. And so really just being aware of how you're feeling. And if you're really not getting what you want out of the experience, give yourself permission to try something new. I know it's scary, but you heard Christy say that she literally bounced around for almost 7 years. And, she just really gave herself permission to find out what it was that she needed to do, which is absolutely incredible. And, it's just, what a great story, Christy. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if it was so much for me, like giving myself permission. It was a do or die. Mm-hmm. That's probably the best way to put it. It was do or die. I got bills to pay. I better do. I better do. But I'll tell you what, to your point about nursing being so broad and having so many opportunities about that, I think that's one reason why I never totally stepped out of nursing altogether. Because I'm like, and I went through the, in my head, I'm like, okay, what else can I do? What else can I do? What other talents, whatever skills, what other knowledge do I have? And because nursing is so wide open, there are so many different opportunities. Even though I went into nursing specifically to do NICU, and then when that kind of came to an end, I knew there was something else that I could do, It just takes a while sometimes to figure it out. And I did. I mean, like I said, I wandered aimlessly for 7 years before I did figure it out. So.
Gotcha. That's great. So what are you doing now? I mean, it sounds like you had a pretty good routine. If we could leave our fellow nurses with 3 to 5 things to help them if they're feeling burned out or if they're going through making a big change because of burnout or any of that sort of continuum of, this topic that is burnout, what tips would you leave them with?
Oh boy. I think that first of all, and I was going to mention this earlier, as far as like the one thing that I learned from all of this, and I'll get to, because I actually do have some points here I want to bring up. One of the things that I would say is that you've got to take a day off. You have to take a day off. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean just a day off from clinical practice or a day off from your business or a day off from whatever. You have to every single week take a day off. And so that was a lifesaver for me. Okay, but for I'm going to say any nurse that is burnout or is on the cusp of burning out or in that position where you think, something not right here, I've got some tips. Okay, first of all, and we talked about this a little bit in the very beginning, and you've got to recognize the signs and symptoms as they manifest in you, because not everybody's going to be different. But when you start to get that uneasy feeling, like, hey, something's not right, hey, I'm not digging my job, I'm short with people, whatever, recognize those signs and symptoms. And I would say they would be, in some people, they're going to manifest differently. So it could be anxiety, it could be weight gain, it could be drinking or drugs, could be sleeping. Because you can escape a lot when you go to sleep, right? What happens when you're depressed, right? Go to sleep, because then you don't have to think about it, right? Or you just get angry and you get a short fuse. So those are kinds of the kind of things or signs or symptoms to look for. Like, am I doing any of that kind of stuff? Does that sound familiar? Or maybe you've just become really apathetic. And whereas, before you used to be really excited and used to serve on committees and used to get all this, additional CEUs, even more than you even needed to, just because you wanted to learn everything. So, but then have you become very apathetic? Okay, so I'm going to say that's step one. The second step is you've got to look at the cause. So you're looking at the symptoms, but now we're nurses and we know we need to go down and drill down and find out what is the cause of it. Mm-hmm. And you've got to really be honest with yourself. And, for me, it was that anxiety. The anxiety really kind of manifests itself as, being short with people, getting angry, probably gained some weight during that time too, and stuff like that. But it was that fear, anxiety, uncertainty. I knew that I wasn't dealing with like the acuity of these kids. And so you've got to get down to the cause of that burnout. What is it?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. And we kind of alluded to the fact that it could just be the job. It could be a lack of a self-care routine. It could be some other dynamic in your life. It could be multiple causes, all kind of compounding on you at the same time. And when I interviewed Sarah Jividen, that was one of her pieces of advice as well, is find the why to the burnout. Because if you can't figure out that why, you can't begin to move forward to try to fix it. So I think that's incredibly important.
Right, exactly. And you know what? You never know. Maybe it's the place that you're working.
Yep.
Like if you go and you get a job for a different hospital system, say, does that burnout, do those things, do they follow you there? Yep. Or do you just kind of rediscover your love for your specialty?
Yep.
And, you know, that's going to say a lot. You know, maybe it just was where you were working or the people that you were working with, you know?
Yep. I always kind of say that when I made a change, I realized after I'd made that change that I was still having those feelings. And the one thing that I realized was that it wasn't all the job, because I took me with me and I was part of the problem.
Yeah, and I think I have to speak to that too. I think now if somebody's not taking care of themselves, it's for you knew that it was part you too. It wasn't entirely the job.
Right.
But for me, like I said, I only felt that way when I was at work. It was just very compartmentalized. It was at work. At home, I was fine. I was good. I was, living La Vida Loca. I would get short with my family, and I usually on a day when I had to go back to work that night. So it didn't have anything to do with my family. I was just taking it out on them, unfortunately. But I could easily point to the fact that I have to go back to work that tonight. That's why I'm pissed off. Get out of my way.
All right, so we've got step 1 and step 2. What's step 3?
Okay, so step 3 is you have to assess where you're at. Assess where you're at in your career and in your personal life. So when I say assess where you're at, for me, it was like, okay, how much is my husband bringing home? Can I afford to go part-time, per diem? And I did. I went from full-time down to part-time, not good enough, down to per diem, which only required me to do 6 shifts a schedule, and the schedule was a month and a half.
Right.
And still, I felt like, oh, that's too much. And I'm like, okay, there's a problem here. I could work one night a month, and it would be a problem. So, but anyway, assess where you're at with that. Take a look at your savings. How long can you get by maybe with part-time work, or your education if you're going to go back to school and stuff. And then also really take a really good close look at your education. What credentials do you have? What certifications do you have? Do you want to pursue them? Do you want to, is like say graduate school an option for you? Mm-hmm. Because it's not going to be an option for everybody. Mm-hmm. Because it could be financially out of reach. Like for me, I had kids in private high school, and then looking at college. So financially, I didn't want to put more money into me because I knew that they would need it. Mm-hmm. But it could also be a thing where, you're sitting there going, gosh, I really don't want to pursue that anymore. So just kind of assess where you're at financially and in your career and in your family. Mm-hmm. And because that's going to open up a lot of things in the next step. Okay, so the next step is now you have to sit down and consider what are your alternatives. What can I do? I'm burnout. I can't stay in that job, or I can't stay in that specialty. What's next? What do I have at my disposal? What are my credentials or certifications that maybe I can use? What are some other interests? And you know what, honestly, sometimes you have to go back, maybe before your nursing career. So it could be 20, 25 years, who knows? But look at what were you interested in before you went into nursing? What careers did you consider before you went into nursing? I mean, in my case, I considered law, but that wasn't really an option for me. I had to throw that out because that would involve going back to school, getting a law degree, working 60 hours a week as an associate. And I just wasn't going to do that, but it could be an option for some other people. Or you may even want to just take a sabbatical, take some time off. Like I took that first time, I took that respite. That's what I called it. Maybe you just need respite. It doesn't, just because you're starting to feel burnout doesn't mean necessarily for everybody that it means a permanent exit plan. Maybe you just need a few months away. I do say that with a word of caution. There is a little caveat here. And that's because in the specialty that I was working in, which was NICU, I was actually talking to a nurse, another NICU nurse, an advanced practice NICU nurse, and I was saying, hey, I'm thinking about coming back. This was after about a year and a half. I was out for just a year and a half. They said they won't take you. I'm like, what are you talking about? They won't take me back. I've been a NICU nurse for 13 years. She's like, well, this has changed, that's changed. And I'm like, I'm doggone better than any new grad. They would have to totally, but the thing is, because you still have your critical thinking. You still know the anatomy and physiology. It's just, okay, show me what new supplies or whatever, that you're using, no big deal. But it's cheaper to hire a new grad. They wouldn't want to hire another nurse or a veteran nurse or something. So that is my word of caution about taking a sabbatical. Make sure that you don't take a sabbatical so long that you can't get back in, if that's what you want to do. Okay, or hey, you can leave clinical, and if you're able to, maybe you can take a non-clinical position. Maybe you can take something in management, or some other type of position that doesn't require, if the clinical side of it is what burn you out, because that's not going to be the case for everybody. There are nurses out there that are working in management positions and they're burnt out because the demands that are placed on them. So I don't want to just say that this is only a clinical nurse problem. It's not. It could be in education, it could be in management, it could be in administration. So anyway, consider your alternatives. I've got one more step. Step number 5.
Well, before you get to number 5, I just want to say, I think that really, really speaks to why you need to dig deep and figure out what the cause of burnout is, because that will give you immense clarity as to how you want to move forward and how you can possibly prevent that from happening in the future, or at least know the signs sooner and more in advance so that you can prevent yourself from getting all the way to the point where you're completely frazzled. So I think that's really, really an important key, is figuring out your why.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, so step 5, my 5th step, and this is very important. I don't want to say more important than the others because the other steps are really important too. But the last step is you have to decide and you have to act. If you don't act, you're going to be stuck in misery. Don't be stuck in misery. Life is too short.
Absolutely.
To just sit there in a job or a position or a career that you don't love. So you need to decide what you're going to do, given all the previous steps. What am I going to do? And act on it. Take those first steps.
That is beautiful. And one thing that I can speak to about that is there's always a lot of angst about making a decision. And the point is that really there is no such thing as a right decision or a wrong decision when it comes to things like this. And the only way that you know if it's moving you in a positive direction is to make the decision and take action and then wait for feedback. Take those steps and then see how you feel. See how it goes. Get that feedback and be open to listening to what that feedback is telling you. That way you can make decisions to adjust course one way or the other. And honestly, that's the only way that you're going to know, is if you make a decision and act on it and then wait to get that feedback and see how it's going. And honestly, there's no judgment or shame or right or wrong in that process. It's just a simple fact. Just do it and see how it goes. There's no right or wrong.
Exactly. Just do it, Jessica, right? Just do it. And I'll tell you what, I did that. I actually, I mean, I decided and I acted, and I've got to say, what I do now, I love what I do now. I absolutely love it. So if I hadn't made a decision and if I hadn't acted on that, I wouldn't be as happy as I am right now. I'm
That is
having so much doggone thinking fun, I can't even contain myself.
That's so beautiful. And here's a little teaser is Christy's actually one of those nurses now nurturing nurses through being an entrepreneur and through supporting nurse entrepreneurs. And I cannot wait to share that story with you. We've got that on the books here in the near future. And so I think those 5 steps are beautiful. And just to sort of summarize them, number 1, listen to your signs and symptoms. Number 2, look at the cause. Number 3, be open and honest and assess where it is that you're at in all of the areas of your life, you know, your career, your finances, your professional life. Number 4 is make a decision about what's next. And then number 5, act on it. Like, just do it. And so I think that those are some really great points to leave our nurses with. And Christy, I just want to share my gratitude with you for being here today, because your story is so amazing. And I know that there are nurses out there who are going to need to hear your story and need to hear your advice. And so I just thank you so much. And I look forward to our next interview where we share all about how you've taken this experience and turned it into something where you're now nurturing nurses.
Oh, I can't wait. I absolutely can't wait. I'm giddy.
I can tell that you're totally fired up. And I can also tell that I'm probably not going to need to ask many questions because you're just like, I can't wait.
I'll tell you all about it. And you know what? And really, and I'll just close with this, it's just that, so you could be trapped in the just most horrible situation right now, in a job that you hate, a career that you're thinking, oh my gosh, why the heck did I do this? Believe me, if I could do this and turn it around and create something out of what was becoming a terrible nursing career for me, and create something that makes me so happy, that I enjoy so much. Honestly, I haven't been this happy in a job. It's not even a job. It's my business. This is the happiest I've been doing what I do now. So yeah, there is light at the end of the tunnel. You can do it. You can do it.
That is beautiful. So don't be stuck. Just do it. It's
What's the point?
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, Christy, thank you again, and I will look forward to our next interview.
Sounds great. I can't wait.